Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome back to Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. And more importantly, we're both here with our very special guest, the former editor of Tiger Beat magazine, Ann Moses. She's been sharing incredible stories about the many teen idols from the 60s and 70s that graced the cover of the famous magazine. And now, if you don't mind, I'd like to move over to the Partridge Family. I was obsessed with that show. I loved it. To me, it was one of the top sitcoms of the 70s. My daughter now loves it. And I saw David Cassidy in concert, and he was fantastic. I know he went on to become Supernova as well.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. What was he like? Your experience with him, impressions, relationship?
Well, when I first met him, he was a little bit on the shy side. And he had done the few guest roles before he got on Marcus Welby and I don't know where else, FBI or something. And so he had really wanted to be an actor. And I don't think he was doing that much singing at the time. But obviously that the Partridge Family brought all those things out. But when I first went on the set, he was just very nice. I found out only like 3 years ago that he was intimidated by me.
Really?
And I found that out from Sharon, who took over my job when I left as the editor. Sharon Lee took over for me as editor when I left in 1972. And she was very close with David. And because he felt like I was the big editor, and I don't know if he was afraid he was going to say something inappropriate or not treat me right. I don't know, because, I remained the same down-to-earth person the whole time I was there. And when Sharon told me that, I go, you've got to be kidding. I never had a clue, because I always felt like he was more of a baby brother to me. He was only 3 years younger, but I'd been working in Hollywood, meeting all these people, and I felt like more like a mentor to him than I don't know, but apparently I intimidated him. But at first he was super cooperative. We would go out there often, and each time we'd find time to talk in between shoots, and he was great. But then he started avoiding me. And when things really started to heat up, and I really didn't know how to handle it. I mean, he would disappear into his dressing room, and I never disturbed him there, but he would manage to slip off the set between scenes and manage to be somewhere I wasn't. So I kind of complained one day to Chuck Lawfer, the publisher. I said, David's really not being cooperative. And, we have a lot of material we need to cover here, because he had also licensed the Partridge Family to produce the official Partridge Family magazine. And so a lot of content was needed. And what he said, let me take care of it. Don't worry about it. And what he turned around and did was he called up Jack Cassidy. He said, I really need your help. I think you need to have a heart-to-heart with David, tell him what this business is like, and tell him what his responsibilities are. And I would love to thank you for doing that by sending your boys dirt bikes. And so he basically made a deal, and the brand new dirt bikes were delivered over to the Cassidy house, and David was more cooperative after that. So
wow.
I know. I mean,
gee.
When I look back on it, it's really like throwing your own son under the bus. But Jack Cassidy was really seasoned, and he knew that this is what you had to do when you were in Hollywood to, to turn into a superstar.
Oh, sure.
So he was willing to do that.
And at
My goodness.
toward the end, did you sense any of his unhappiness on the show later on with David?
Not really. Not really. No, he was really professional out on the set, when he was doing his work and all that.
Now I'll go over into another favorite. Let's go to Elvis. You're actually in the '68 comeback special. You're also in the documentary Elvis, That's the Way It Is. I want to hear about those experiences, and you want about his Vegas shows. Elvis seems almost humble in your writings. I mean, and this is Elvis. So any anecdotes you have about him at all?
Well, the '68 comeback special was just really a revelation for me, because I really hadn't been an Elvis fan, after like 6th grade. I mean, of course, the first wave when he was first on Ed Sullivan and all that, I had the records, and my parents got me an Elvis scarf for Christmas, and all that. But I mean, as soon as the British invasion hit, I never gave Elvis another thought. And I wasn't a fan of going to his movies at the time, because, I mean, the movies like Speedway and those, they just, I did watch Blue Hawaii the other night. It was pretty good. Corny as it was, but they've got Elvis singing, so what are you going to do? And so it was his representative at RCA Records. He called me up and he said, I've got these 2 tickets, you need to go to this. And I had learned to trust his word. And so I showed up not having any idea what I was going to. There had not been any trade news about him doing a special or anything like that. And so I showed up, and we walk in, and there are just these 2 sets of bleachers that maybe hold, I don't know, 75 people or something. I mean, not very many. And we were let in, and I was seated in the second to the last row. And then it was getting closer to the time that they were going to start filming, and in comes Priscilla and her entourage. She sits right behind us. And that was like, and she didn't have her beehive hairdo. She had long, flowing, hairstyle of 1968, and it was gorgeous. So like, that was the first revelation. So her beehive's gone. And then before he came, they showed us a couple of clips while we were waiting of production numbers that were already on film. And like, this is going to be really cool. But then the guy who was, taking care of the audience, he said, Elvis is going to come out and play with his band on this little bitty stage. And I mean, it couldn't have been wider than 10 by 10. It was really small. And he said, so who would like to sit around the stage? And of course, my hand went up. But everybody's hand went up. Are you kidding me? So the guy, and here I am at the very top. So I thought, well, he'll never make it up this far. And he goes and he's picking people. And he said, okay, you can come down. And here I am walking down toward the stage, and I'm sitting like 3 feet away from Elvis. And he's all in the black leather. And it's just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I just fell in love with him all over again. Like when I was in 5th grade, it was just like, oh my gosh. And then to hear that voice that closely with only the background music that was there, it was just, it was mesmerizing. And what I never expected, but then I would find out in a couple of months, was I ended up that the film editors had superimposed Elvis's face next to mine while he's singing Can't Help Falling in Love. And so I'm getting screenshots off my TV of me and Elvis's face next to one another. So I'm looking up at him and it's like, oh my God, he stole my heart. And so that was ultra cool. And to also have that leg up, knowing that Elvis was going to be coming back to Vegas, and, you know, his whole career was having its second startup. And I just think that was the best time of his whole career, the way he looked and sounded. And then also unexpectedly, I got a call from Dennis Sanders, who directed Elvis, That's the Way It Is. And he said, this documentary we're doing on Elvis is going to include segments where fans tell why they love Elvis. And everybody said, well, you should talk to Ann Moses. And I went, oh, okay. And of course, in those days, I was so nervous to be on a camera. And I just thought while he was filming the interview, I know my voice was trembling and I was just so nervous, but it turned out okay. But then after he came to my office, filmed that interview, filmed me walking down the hall to the artist's office. And then Dennis Sanders said, well, now we're going to follow these same fans when he opens, you know, in Vegas, you know, because the documentary follows him rehearsing. And he said, so we want all you fans there on opening night. I thought, I can deal with this. This is cool. And I had seen him, of course, on his debut night in August 1st in 69. And I think this was in 70. So we go to Vegas, getting, you know, trying to kill time and not, you know, we lost our $20 we allotted for slots in like 5 minutes. So that was that. And then it came time to go in. And then the maitre d' leads us right down to the front row, right next to the stage. I mean, I could set my arm on the stage like this. So then up till that point, he hadn't been kissing the girls in the audience. Like during his first appearance, that didn't go on. But this night he walks straight out and he came to me first. I don't know, maybe I had seen him do it before, but anyway, he kissed me. The first, because I was right next to stage right, and he came walking out and he came over and he kissed me. And it's like, it was not a peck, it was a kiss. And it was really awesome. And then I'm kind of standing there dumbstruck. Then he kissed my girlfriend who was along with me. And then he went along and he kissed some of the fans that they had placed strategically. Obviously not all of them, because there were some guy fans and that were in the movie. But really the best thing that happened was after he had put the movie together, but it hadn't been released yet, Dennis Sanders invited me and a group of friends I knew that loved Elvis to, they had come and filmed an Elvis party, because I was in this group where the guys would play guitar and lip sync to Elvis songs, and sometimes just sing them, but mostly lip sync. So Dennis Sanders had asked if he could come film that. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't think everybody'd be real comfortable, but I'll ask him. And he goes, oh, we'll just bring a little handheld camera. I said, okay. And then the night, it's at our friend's house in Redondo Beach. It's an apartment over a garage. And I pull into the alleyway to park to go into the party. And here is this generator the size of a VW Bug. And I'm going, okay. And then I go up and they're all set up with a camera. And it's a full-on MGM movie camera with a great big, not even a tripod. It's like a quad pod. And I'm going, oh, I don't know. So the party starts and the guys are not comfortable. they're all self-conscious. You know, they were fine on, you know, imitating Elvis in front of us, but, you know, to do it for the MGM cameras, I don't know. But they managed to, you know, down a little bit of wine, go outside and have a little toke or two. And then they came back and they were all feeling pretty good. And so he filmed all that. So he invited us to MGM Studios that day. And he gave us all a private showing of that footage. So we got to see ourselves. And it never ended up in the movie. And I got to see my kiss with Elvis. And I thought, oh, that is just, I mean, if I could have had that little piece of 35 millimeter film, I'm telling you. But I did not get that. That was cut out of the movie. I think my kiss is cut out too in the finished version. I don't think you see him kissing me like we got to that day. But man, that was incredible to see yourself. And this is the way everybody else that was there felt. They got to see themselves up on a giant MGM movie screen in the screening room. And even though it didn't make it into the movie, they all just thought this was the coolest thing ever. So that was really, really fun. My favorite time with Elvis, though, was, well, it was, I can't remember in sequence what it was, but I asked the PR person on the movie Change of Habit
I was going to ask
if
you
I
about
could come out onto the set. And nobody ever got to interview Elvis or, you know, or photograph him. And so he said, but you can't, you just have to stand and watch. You can't take notes. You can't, you know, interview him, nothing. And I said, I'm happy to just be there and watch. This is just fine. Well, so I went one day and we were out, I think at Columbia Studios. I can't remember where it was, but it was outdoors. It was the merry-go-round scene. And over and over and over, they're singing. He and Mary Tyler Moore, he's singing to the little girl that's troubled, and they're walking around the merry-go-round because it's going around. And they filmed it, and then they refilmed it, and this went on the whole day. But in between shots, he lays down on a blanket with Mary Tyler Moore, with all of the extras around, with me there, everything, and they are making out like teenagers, laying on a blanket, smooching, and nothing more than that. They weren't handsy, but it was like, I was going, she's married, he's married, this is weird. And I didn't know if it was just a set thing or whatever, but I mean, it stuck in my brain because it was so unexpected.
What's amazing to me is that if that were to happen today, it would have been all over. And then back then it was like, I guess, an unspoken, you know, thing that no one would talk about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And of course I talked about it, but I don't really think I didn't recount that until my book. Because it wasn't like I was going to put something like that in Tiger Beat or in the articles I wrote about Elvis for New Musical Express in England. But then the next day, then I got to go back. That was a Friday. And on Monday, they were shooting again. And I got to go back. And they were filming the indoor scene where Elvis is singing Rubberneckin'. So I must have heard Rubberneckin' 40 times. Over and over and over, they're filming it, of course, you know, from every angle and close-ups, and so you have to do it multiple times. But at one point, and I'm just enjoying being there. I mean, you know, everybody on the set, it's really interesting on an Elvis set because I've been on Monkey sets, and that was just like a free-for-all. They didn't care if friends were there. They'd be joking around between scenes. Well, on an Elvis set, Elvis just goes to his chair or his dressing room and maybe some of his guys are hanging out to chat with him, and maybe not, but nobody just goes up and starts talking to Elvis. And so I got what the feeling was like. And then all of a sudden, though, he walks over to me. This is in between, where they're on a break. And so the publicist introduces me, and, Elvis, it's nice to meet you. Or, I mean, it was like this Elvis's voice, and shaking my hand. And then he said, "You look familiar to me." And I was going, how is that possible? Come on, you're Elvis, I'm me. Of course, I didn't say that, but I just kind of looked at him and I said, well, I don't know how that would have happened. And he said, I know what it is. You're in the comeback special. And I said, are you kidding? And it's like, Elvis said he recognized my face. And so then I said, oh, I really like your jacket, because he had this really cool leather jacket on. And he said, oh, I got it off the rack. That doesn't happen very often, but I really like it. I said, yeah, it's really neat. And we might have had a couple more words, and then he was called back to the set. So that was as brief as it was, but it was just the two of us, and, eye to eye. And oh my gosh, he was just a dreamboat. That's all I can say. He really, really was.
Wow.
And just the sweetest he could be. And so that was wonderful that I got to, especially when I wasn't expecting it. I was reconciled to, I'll never get to talk to him.
Wow.
And here I got you. So it was really, really neat.
I'll go on to something. You had a relationship with Morris Gibb from the Bee Gees, and
Yes.
yes. Now, how is that? I mean, there's, you said from a girl in California to someone who's getting known worldwide. Just how is that experience? I mean, I read, I read the book, and it does not end nicely. But how was that experience while in the moment?
Oh, it was really wonderful and so different from anything that I had experienced before. I mean, I'd had a one-day date with Carl Green of the Herman's Hermits. And we had spent a day horseback riding and watching fireworks. It was July 4th, and very innocent. And then I didn't date any other celebrities really at that point. Well, I mean, I did have my couple-month boyfriend, Dick Dodd of the Standells, but that ended about as soon as it started. And so when I went to interview the Bee Gees, I just didn't, it was just another new group. I knew they'd have like British accents, and that was fun. But then when I got there, and Robert Stigwood said, well, why don't you guys all go out on the patio? And so we were out on this small patio, and I did my usual interview things, but I just seemed to have this connection with Morris, and it was a totally new experience to me. I mean, we were really looking at each other during the interview, and I don't know, it was just totally new to me. So he says, why don't you walk with us? We're getting ready to go do some TV show or something. Why don't you walk out of the hotel with us? I said, fine. And the other guys were up ahead. I was hanging back with Morris, and we were slowly walking out. And as we're walking out, he said, oh, I love your necklace. And I had on a beaded Indian necklace that hung down, and I had made it, with a little loom from the craft store, and they were so in it. And I said, well, I made it. Would you like me to make one for you? And he said, yes, that would be great. So he said, took my reporter's notebook, wrote down his address, and I didn't go back to work that day. I was so high, and I immediately went to the craft store and picked up colored beads and wanted to go home and start working on it. Well, it was like that. I think that was in July. It was like a couple of months later, probably in August. And one day at 5 a.m, my phone rings, which it had never done for any reason. I mean, why would you? And it's Morris calling from London. And I am just going, I can't believe it. That I had never had an experience like that, a transatlantic phone call from, of all people, Morris Gibb. And we talked, and he thanked me for the necklace. And then lo and behold, he called me again, and he called me again. Well, and we just chat, getting to know one another. And he was never in a rush, even though it was costing a fortune in those days. And so about the third or fourth time he called, he said, I'd really like you to come over and stay with me and my family in London. And I said, that would be wonderful. I said, do you think you could get the time off? Of course, I checked with the boss, and they said, yeah, you can go on a working vacation, no problem. Only I wasn't being paid to go. It was, my own dime. But, so I booked 3 weeks in London, and I flew over. I'd never been, well, I'd been out of California, a handful of times by that, but never overseas. And here I am landing in London, and everything that happened during that time was so unexpected because I'd never experienced anything like that. So he meets me at the airport, but before that, when we're about to get off the plane, a representative from the airline comes on the plane and said, and Moses, and I raised my hand, and he said, please come this way. I'll escort you to customs. He escorted me through customs. That went super fast because this airline dude is with me. And then once I got through customs, there was Morris waiting for me. And he walked me out, and he had shown up in John Lennon's Rolls Royce with his chauffeur, and it was black then, it wasn't painted yet. And so I spent the next 3 weeks with my mouth hanging open, like, I can't believe this. So we just had, everything we did. But that first night I'm there in London, and we drive about 100 miles to wherever they were appearing. And even though they'd had the big hit with Massachusetts, and they were really growing as a group, they were still doing like 100-person little, veterans of foreign wars halls in these small towns. So that first night, they're on a stage about this tall. It's maybe 12 inches tall. And so everybody can kind of stand around, but everybody else was just dancing to the music. They weren't there ogling the Bee Gees. They weren't that huge yet where they were just performing. They were still like a dance band. And so I'm standing there next to the stage, and I'm just going, that's my boyfriend on the stage, and I'm just, so everything, the sights and sound of London in 1967, and, Carnaby Street, and just everything was just incredible. So for a brief while, we had a very, very wonderful time together.
Well, I'll get to this. I mean, I had liked Lulu also until I read your book, and then
I had too.
Yes, I was angry with her on your behalf. So afterwards, because she kind of like was very nasty to you. I mean, really.
She was, again, totally unexpected. I mean, I had never met like a catty girl in school. I mean, we didn't have mean girls back then. I mean, everybody was nicer. I don't know how to say it, but so we were at the Sundays at the Savile. So we were at Sundays at the Savile, and we were seeing, some really cool group. I can't remember who, but just before, and we were sitting in Brian Epstein's box. He had died just a few months previous, but Robert Stigwood was like his protege. So there we were in Brian Epstein's box, really great shot from the side. And we were sitting right in front. And then right at the last minute, Lulu and her manager came in. And everybody said hi, no big deal, and then the show started. And then after the show, as we're leaving, she says, well, we're going out for steak. Would you like to come with us? And Morris said, yeah, sure. And so we went along, and we were all chatting at dinner. It was the four of us. And dinner was almost over, and it had all been very pleasant. And then Morris gets up and goes to the men's room, went to the loo, and Lulu leans over toward me and she says, when you're gone, I'll be the one dating Morris. And again, I was just dumbfounded. How do you respond to something like that? It's like I was speechless because I wouldn't have known what to say, and anything I would have said would have been so lame. So right then, luckily, Morris came back and he said, well, time to go. Let's go. We put on our coats. We go outside. And he kind of looked at me and he said, are you okay? And I lied. And I said, yeah, I'm just tired, And so I never told him about it. But then they come over in late January of '68 to do the Smothers Brothers show. And he was going to come over just to see me in November, but then they got booked for things and he couldn't do that. And all the time we were corresponding and exchanging Christmas gifts and, talking on the phone. And as far as I was concerned, our boyfriend-girlfriend relationship was just moving along just fine. And he came over, and instead of staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel the whole week, he stayed with me. And I told him I wasn't coming into work, and every day I would drive him wherever they need to be, if they were doing an interview or if they were rehearsing for the Smothers Brothers show, and then I'd spend the day with them rehearsing. And so on the night before my 21st birthday, and he knew all about my birthday party and how my parents were coming up to my little house in Hollywood, and they were giving me this 21st birthday party. And then the people at Tiger Beat, they were having dessert at Ralph Benner's house for all the people at work, and they knew we were coming over afterward. So on that night, we went to a wonderful party at Lee Greenwood's house, the producer of Nancy Sinatra's producer. And, some of the monkeys were there and all kinds of people. And Morris and I had a lovely time. We come home, we did what we'd done every other night of that week, and we made love. And afterward, he said, I have something to tell you. And I said, okay. And he said, Lulu and I are married. And here's Annie, dumbstruck again, like, what are you talking about? I didn't ask him a question. I didn't call him names. Anything I might have done, I just didn't have the capacity. And I said, I'm driving you back to the hotel. And we pretty much rode in silence. And as he was getting out of the car, I said, you had better show up tomorrow night with flowers and a limo. And, I won't have you ruining this 21st birthday party that my parents are putting on for me. So he did, in fact, show up. He was really congenial to everybody. Nobody knew. I didn't even tell my parents. I couldn't tell it anybody. I was just too ashamed. And I was really mean to him that night. I mean, I'd spent a week stewing about it and not understanding. So everything, he'd make some comment to me and I go, oh yeah, sure. That's what a married, it's like I just made snide remarks to him all night, but he put up with it. But then we get over to the Tiger Beat party for dessert and drinks. And I had no idea that night Chuck was making me officially editor of the magazine. And so he gives this whole wonderful speech about how great I am and how I really helped the magazine grow. And so I'm just standing there going, I needed that. I really needed that, that validation. And then he took me home, and that was the last time I ever saw him.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
Goodness.
So, but things happen for a reason.
Yes.
And
like said,
now we have 20/20 hindsight. And, when I was with Morris, he wasn't an alcoholic. So I didn't have to deal with anything like that. And he was so nice, and his family, I did stay with his family in one of the suburbs of London. And, his parents were just dear hearts. They were so sweet. And a little Andy was there. Andy was selling Barry Gibbs bathwater for 10 cents a jar. I'm serious. He was.
It took me a second to catch up with that, but that's fantastic. I wish I'd thought of that.
I know. And when we'd want to get rid of him, if we were hanging out at the house before we were going to go, because we spent very little time there, we'd give him a quarter to go down to the little candy store and get candy to just get him out of our hair. And then, then he becomes Andy Gibb, a superstar. So it's like, oh my gosh. So I wouldn't trade the trip to London for anything. And the rest was supposed to work out how it was supposed to, which we all, if you spend enough time, you understand why things happened.
Sure.
You might not understand why, but you understand they happened. And that led to the next thing, which led to the next thing, which eventually led to the perfect thing. So,
well, I just have a couple of questions. So if you don't mind, I'll get into Bobby Sherman, who also comes across really well in your book, seems kind and generous. Can you tell us a little bit about him? He was, by the time he had made it big, I mean, he had his fans from his Shindig days, but the Shindig audience just wasn't enough to make him a superstar. It helped him sell some records in the start, but then when he got Here Come the Brides, I'm telling you, that combination of, I call it the trifecta of making records, and being on television in people's homes once a week. And he was in character of the 1880s, not like the Monkees that were contemporary. They had a contemporary storyline. It didn't matter. They got to see Bobby every week. So he just became huge. And by that time, he is 4 years older than I am. He just turned 78. So by that time, he was just such a professional that he really had a concept of what we needed. And he would tell me, he goes, I don't want to talk to you just in between scenes and give you little bits and pieces. So anytime I needed material,
he took me out to lunch at the Yankee Peddler. I'd have prime rib and horseradish sauce. Oh, it was so good. And I mean, that's not the kind of food I ate at home. You know, we were a very middle-class family that didn't eat steak. And so that was kind of a treat. But he'd always take a 2-hour lunch. And so I'd record our entire lunch, whatever the topic was. Then I had all this wonderful material. And it's just anytime we needed photographs, it was fine. He'd have me out to the house. We did At Home with Bobby. You know, then there was all his dogs. You know, he had the big bloodhounds, and he loved them. Not my favorite, but you know, it was Dopey, and I can't remember who else. But he was different from the other superstars because he had grown up in the San Fernando Valley, I think in Sherman Oaks, and he had been really grounded his whole life. His parents were just quintessential middle-class parents taking care of their family and instilling values. And so Bobby never got tainted by how show business can just overwhelm the young stars, and they don't know how to act, and they don't know. There's a big learning curve, and he had already made that curve. And so there was no drama with Bobby. It was always just cooperation. He treated me like a friend. I considered him a friend. And so every time I had to go see Bobby, it was always a pleasure. And I knew to expect that, and he always delivered. So he really made it fun. I mean, it was like zero effort to cover Bobby, and just because of the great guy he was.
And he wrote the foreword for your book.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Isn't that so cool?
The last group I'll ask you about now, and this is the one my daughter's obsessed with. Okay. Donnie Osmond, and the Osmond family. You go very close with them as well.
I did. Donnie was so young then. He had his 14th birthday party at my apartment. I had left the little house I was in, and we celebrated after the fact because he had turned 14 in December, but we did the celebration and everything in February, and so we could photograph it. But every interaction with the Osmonds was also so enjoyable because they never wavered from being genuinely themselves. They never had a show business side and a private side. You got to see their soul when you would go to see them sing. They really were a tight family. We wrote about, how they were devout Mormons. And I think the reason that Olive Osmond was so nice to me was because I never took advantage of Donnie. I guess she had allowed Donnie to do some pictures for 16 magazine, and Gloria had some shots done of him topless. And one of the important things about Mormons is that they are very modest. They wear garments under their regular clothes, and this was their belief. And so when Gloria did that, I mean, it made his mom and dad so angry. And I never crossed over a line with them because I respected it. I intentionally would never have done that. And still, our readers got all they needed of pinups of Donnie and everything else. So it was great to work with them. And then just before I left Tiger Beat, I was invited to their brother Tom Burrell's wedding. I can't remember if it was Tom or Anyway, one of the older brothers who weren't in the singing group, one of the brothers who was deaf, went to his wedding. And I mean, they were so, and I didn't go to the wedding, obviously it was in the temple, but then they have the big reception afterward for everybody. And it was at the Hotel Utah. And I mean, it was just so much fun. The boys, they were all dressed in tuxedos. They looked like $1,000,000. I shot so many great pictures. And then they fixed up the car with shaving cream and cans and all that stuff in the downstairs garage. And I have pictures of them doing the whole thing. Well, I get back to my hotel room and I go to take my film out of the camera and it hadn't gone through. It had never.
No.
And so I had some pictures and I had 2 shots at the start of the roll that were just as much as it got, over the lens, and nothing else after that of the 36 roll. And it was the one of Donnie in a tuxedo smiling, and I think one of he and Jay, and they went on the cover. But all these incredible pictures I didn't get.
Oh, that is devastating.
It is, but
and I know
I had a great time.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my only photo, and predominantly most of the pictures were taken by the staff photographers. But when I would travel like that, it was like, that was fine that I was going to shoot the pictures. Little did they know, wasn't so fine on that occasion.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot quickly. Who was the best in concert of all the ones you've seen?
I would have to say the Osmonds.
Mm-hmm.
They're the way that family danced. I mean, because that was one of the hard things for me with David Cassidy. I know his millions and millions of fans adored his concerts, and I don't begrudge them having those wonderful moments with him. But he really, all he did is kind of bend over and stick his butt out, And the Osmonds, they have this choreographed show, and they were just so multi-talented that everything they did, and then the sound together. And I mean, I had seen a lot of big acts, whether it was the Beatles or the Stones or, Jefferson Airplane or the Monkees, and the Monkees concerts are great fun. But I just think overall, the Osmonds were they were the whole package. They were really, really good.
Yeah, my jaw drops. They're incredible.
Yes.
I totally, just absolutely incredible. Now, I just want to, you left Tiger Beat. So, I mean, when this book came out, I just want to know, did anyone acknowledge it over at Tiger Beat? Did they,
Well, you see, Tiger Beat had been sold a number of times. It was sold in 79. Chuck Loffer sold it. And so then it went back to New York. Then it was sold back and forth 3 or 4 more times, different people owning it, different locations. And then about the, 5th or 6th sale, it was actually bought back by one of Chuck Loffer's sons.
Oh.
And he ran it for several years. This was in the early 2000s, I think. And then sometime in the last 5 years, he was bought out and sold to a big conglomerate in New York. And then it was being published as a slick, all-color publication, obviously more like today's magazines than back then. And now for the last year or 2, they've been strictly online. But it's still the name Tiger Beat. They always kept that name. So it goes.
Do you still keep in touch with anyone out of all the celebrities?
Oh, I have stayed really, really close with Lottie Powell, which not too many people know because she was, she was prominent in the first year or so. And she's older than we are. So she just, she came in and did her work, and she didn't care about all the stars and stuff. And then Sharon Lee took over my job when I left in 72. And we have remained close friends all this time. When I went back to do a David Cassidy interview with CNN for their How It Really Happened series, I stayed with Sharon. My husband and I stayed with her in New York because she's there because of her son. And so we just remain tight, and it just means so much because there's nobody else that went through what we all went through. So
how about the singers and celebrities that I know Bobby Sherman, you still get, and anyone else? Or
since I haven't stayed in personal touch with them. Now, Jim Valley, who was Harpo in the Raiders, he invited me to his 70th birthday party a few years ago. And so my husband and I flew up. We spent the afternoon at Jim's place, which is just incredible, up in Washington. And, he actually lives in a historic trading post. And it's just, it's such a beautiful setting, and it's right on the water. And we had so much fun that night. And he had his 70th birthday party, and he played on the stage with the guys, and then they played something. I danced for hours, and I had the sorest legs I've had. I haven't danced like that. But you couldn't not move to their music. It was so fabulous. And I can't think of anyone else. I've obviously recently been in touch with the Cowsills, and then I did get to have a reunion with Peter and briefly with Mickey. That was about, I think that was 2012. Because I went and saw him again in 2014 at our local show here in Arizona. It's just 4 miles from my house. And Peter a family member had gotten ill, and he had to leave the tour, so I didn't get to see him. But Mike flew in and subbed for him and finished the tour for him. But every time Mike avoided me. There's one picture from, I think, the 2012 reunion, and I had no idea. I had done lots of stories with Coco Dolan's back in the day, my brother Mickey, all those stories, tour of his hometown, and Coco was there, and and she's been appearing with them for years, and I had no idea. And I saw her backstage. She remembered me. We had this big bear hug. And what was funny is, Mike Nesmith had told Andrew Sandoval, no, I'm not talking to her. And when I get the pictures, when I see the pictures, because I didn't see him while they were taking them, here's Mike Nesmith sneaking out the door as I'm hugging Coco. And I just went, oh my gosh, gotcha.
Wow.
So he was totally true to form, but seeing them, and those reunion shows are really incredible.
Do you still do convention? Do you do conventions at all? I've
never have. I would love to. Now that I'm aware of those things, I would absolutely love to. I was invited to be a guest speaker at Graceland and talk about Elvis. That was, I think, 3 years ago. Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. And I just couldn't believe it. I had this whole session and I spoke, and then people lined up to buy my book and take a picture with me. And it was just like, and they go, may I please have a picture? And they go, yes, get around here, come on, and they're going, really, is that okay? And it's like, yeah, it's okay. And it was just joyful. It was just such a neat experience.
And people can get autographed copies of the book on your website?
They can, AnnMoses.com.
We're going to put the links in when we...
Right. And also it's available on Amazon. And if you're old like me and need to read on a Kindle and enlarge the type, there's a Kindle edition or an ebook. So have at it.
So you have AnnMoses.com. You have a great Facebook page. That there any other social media that we should be?
Not at this time. Working on Insta. So, I'll get there.
Well, and the book is again, Meow, My Groovy Life with Tiger Beats Teen Idols. And thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to get to speak to you. I mean, we could spend weeks talking to you with your stories. So
we probably could, but this was great. And I love your enthusiasm, and it's been my pleasure.
No, and I have to thank you too, because I kept having to remind myself that I'm actually on the show with you here, because I just sat back and got caught up in listening to you tell the stories. It's just fantastic.
Oh, I'm
really
glad I heard your Tiger Beat story. That was just, I mean, I was expecting you to say it was, like Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal or something that you were giving a ride to, somebody super famous, because you said it was the Oscars, but then when the story turned out like that, it was just like, oh, that is too precious.
Yeah, of course, very traumatizing at the time, but like you said,
yeah.
in hindsight, all of a sudden it's like the gold we get to mine now for all these fantastic memories and retellings. So thank you for listening.
There's nobody that wouldn't appreciate that story. I mean, there'd be a lot of millennials who couldn't understand it. What do you mean your wallet was stolen and you couldn't
exactly
track them on your phone or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't like that then.
Oh, no, not at all.
Well, and anytime you want to come back, you have an open invite. We'd love to have you. This was, like I said, an honor.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you. Again, this has been Pop Culture Retro on behalf of myself and Ike Eisenmann and Ann Moses. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.